Welcome to the Monetize Your Payments podcast, where we cover the entire payment facilitator ecosystem. If you are a SaaS company, ISV, or a marketplace interested in monetizing your payments, this podcast is for you. You will learn what it takes to monetize your payments, as well as find the vendors, suppliers, and organizations that will help you succeed. You are going to hear success stories, lessons learned, and advice from all sides and all angles across the payment facilitator ecosystem.
From 2015 to today, we've seen just absolutely, I would say, exponential growth in a lot of areas, in the areas of obviously the number of auctions we run, the bids we process. We've had over 1 million downloads of our app. We have run tens of thousands of charity events in that time frame as well. And we've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for charity since that kind of 2015 time frame.
This is episode 13 of the Monetize Your Payments podcast, and that was Jeff Porter, the CEO of Handbid. I'm your host, Greg Myers, and Jeff is our special guest this week. Jeff was born in Colorado and currently lives in a suburb of Denver, but he mostly grew up in the Washington, D.C. area and went to the University of Virginia, where he got a degree in electrical engineering. Handbid is an automated events fundraising platform built around silent and online auctions. His startup story is fascinating and actually has ties into the Kentucky Derby of all things. The main reason they've integrated payments into their platform is for the customer experience. Currently, they primarily leverage Stripe because of their developer tools. We've got a great conversation with Jeff today, so let's jump right in. Hi, Jeff, and welcome to the Monetize Your Payments podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Greg, for having me.
Absolutely. So start off by having you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that.
Sure. Well, I currently live in Colorado. I was actually born here, ironically, at the United States Air Force Academy. But as an Air Force kid, we moved around a little bit. I actually mostly grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. Then I ended up going to the University of Virginia. I got a bachelor's of science in electrical engineering. And as soon as that diploma was in my hand, I moved back to Colorado. So I currently live here. I live in Castle Pines, a suburb of Denver. I've got 4 kids. I've got one in college, and I've got one special needs adult who just actually graduated from high school, and I've got 2 younger daughters in high school.
Awesome. So do you get to ski a lot?
I do. Yes. Well, I will tell you that kids' activities have definitely put a little bit of a damper on the ski schedule, but as they get older and they're able to drive, I'm able to get back up on the slopes.
Awesome. So today you're the founder and CEO of Handbid. So maybe tell our audience the founder story. So how did it get started? What's the story behind it?
Sure. And I know we might dive into this a little bit deeper, but Handbid is a automated events fundraising platform that's primarily built around silent auctions and online auctions. And it's in the charity space. And where we got involved in that was we had a special needs child who was born in 2002. By 2004, my wife and I had decided that we wanted to get more involved in helping other families who were impacted by the same disorder my daughter had. It's called Prader-Willi syndrome. And it's just one of those things that you never expect your kid to have it. And you don't even know what it is until your kid is diagnosed with it. And it's got some impacts on families. And we wanted to start up a charity that would help these families. And, when you start a charity, first thing you got to do is you got to decide how you're going to help people. And then you have to have the resources to do that. And for us, that was money. The only way we knew how to raise money is we knew how to throw a party. So we had an annual Kentucky Derby party that we had at our house. And that was kind of a little bit of a carryover from the East Coast to Denver. And we turned it into a fundraiser in 2005. And it was interesting. Not all, but a huge chunk of our friends who came for the party stopped coming, and a huge new group of people who was interested in supporting our cause, they started to come. And we're trying to figure out how do we put together all these tools, that are going to help us not just manage this event, but raise money online and whatnot. And back in 2005, there just wasn't a lot of tools out there. There just wasn't, I would say, the nonprofit technology that existed was pretty sparse and it was pretty expensive. And having a technology background, we were interested in trying to figure out how to address that issue and also make it a little bit more user-friendly. So ironically, we didn't start with auctions. We started by building other types of fundraising tools like peer-to-peer fundraising and stuff. And Kind of odd that a real small startup charity in Colorado was building its own software, but we were. And then 2010 comes, we've been running this Derby event for about 5 years. And at the same time, I was hosting and running a mobile software development company. And I said to the guys in one of our projects, I said, hey, you know what would be really cool? It'd be really cool if we built an app for the iPhone and Android that would allow people to bid from their phone in an auction. And of course, all my software developers were like, what in the heck is an auction? Like a silent auction. And I said, all right, well, I start to explain it to them. And then I went home and I told my wife, I said, I got this great idea. I said, we've got a little bit of downtime between projects, and I'm going to have these guys build an app that will let people bid from their phones at the auction. She says, I don't think that's a great idea. And I was like, all right, well, we'll go ahead and do it anyway. And I'll just kind of slow play this idea with you. I mean, just to let you know, my wife is also a software developer. So she definitely understands and appreciates technology. And in 2010, we ran our Derby event. And at the end of the event, I tend to walk around and thank people for coming. And my wife is usually the one who is coordinating everything, organizing everything. And so I see her over there at the front desk where everybody was kind of gathered, ready to leave the venue. And I saw this massive line of people that's kind of wrapped around the front of the venue. And my wife is up there frantically shuffling papers. And I was thinking to myself, should I go up there or should I just kind of let this one go?
Right.
I think, no, I should go up there and see what's going on. So I went up there. I said, hey, what's going on? She's like, it's a total disaster. I'll tell you later. Right. And so what had happened was we just had a collection of issues trying to close out that silent auction. Everything was done on paper bid sheets back then. So we had about 150 bid sheets. And at the end of the auction, at the end of the event, all of those get kind of assembled into a big stack. They're handed to a set of volunteers, and those volunteers need to enter in that data into a computer program, ironically written by my wife, that was going to auto-generate all these receipts. Well, the data that they entered was backwards in a lot of cases. So they were attributing like item 107 to bidder 112, and it really should have been bidder 112 winning item 107. So there's a little bit of that. They couldn't read handwriting. So anyway, at the end of the day, all the invoices were wrong. And so they're having to kind of hand calculate everything. So anyway, we left the event that night and I said, don't worry, next year we're going to automate this. She said, it makes no sense for us to be building an auction app. Just go see what's out there. So we looked around, ran into a company that had a pretty, I would say at the time, appeared to be a fairly slick product. We got a quote from them. It was outrageous. I mean, I want to say they wanted to charge me $8,000 or $10,000 to run the event. And I said at that point, we should just go ahead and build something. So I set my developers off on the task of building a mobile bidding application for the iPhone and the Android and the iPad. And we did a little proof of concept internally at our company. I showed it to my business partner. He thought it was cool. And then that was kind of it. We rolled into a project that happened to be down in Brazil. And so we all kind of got focused on that. And about early mid-January, he said to me, he goes, hey, what'd you ever do with that auction app? And I said, oh, yeah, it works, but it needs a lot of work to really make it usable. He said, you think you can have it working by May? I said, why? He goes, because I sold it. I said, what do you mean you sold it? He goes, you guys are running this event in LA at the end of May. He goes, and if I were you, I wouldn't make that the first event you ever use this thing on. So you better get it done. And I was like, oh gosh. So we decided to actually launch it at our Derby event, which is the first weekend in May. And so we definitely had a little bit of work we had to get done. And that's what we spent the spring doing. And I remember it was Easter weekend. It was about 2 or 3 weeks before the event. And we had a lot of friends and family over to test the application. And Greg, it didn't work. Okay. I mean, and I remember my mother-in-law standing up and basically telling me, you're going to ruin this event. You're going to ruin this charity. You can't use this thing. No one wants to use an app on their phone. This is ridiculous. And I was like, all right, well, we're going to press forward here because I think we can get these bugs fixed. And so one of my software developers actually moved into our house and lived with me for the last 2 weeks that we built this. And it was the morning of the event when we finally got all the pieces together to the point where we knew it was going to work. As you can imagine, it wasn't 100% stable, but it was absolutely, we knew it was going to, for the most part, work. So we roll into the event. We had a tablet application because back in 2011, only about 17 to 18% of mobile subscribers actually owned a smartphone. So we didn't think that a lot of people would have the type of phone you needed to put an app on it. We had a tablet for them. We had the iPhone app working, and we doubled our auction revenue. People overwhelmingly loved it. I had my mother-in-law's, one of her best friends came up and said, "This is a genius idea. This was so much more fun." I mean, it proved a lot of things to us. One, people are willing to use technology in an event. Two, it allowed people to actually stay more connected to the auction when it was on their phone because they weren't constantly having to get up to walk over to a paper bid sheet to see if they were still winning. And that also meant that they could react to counter bidding much faster, right? So if I walked in and outbid you, Handbid would tell you right away. Whereas if it was on a bid sheet, you wouldn't know until you went over and checked. And it took that checkout that year before where that checkout was a complete mess. It eliminated all the human errors that would have been there, and checkout took about 15 minutes. So that kind of set us off. We knew at that point that we had a product that was going to benefit a lot of charities. And so that kind of kicked us off on the track to grow and build Handbid into what it is today.
So in 2012, what was and we're going to get more into the payment side in a minute, but curious, how was the payments part of the silent auction done back then?
So prior to Handbid, you would walk up to the checkout, and if I had a credit card system, we had one of those terminals that we rented from the bank. And so I would calculate your invoice by hand, or even if I had a subtotal, whatever else I had to add to your invoice, I'd have to manually do that. And then I would key into the credit card machine what your total was and swipe your card and process it. Okay. When we moved to Handbid in 2011, we were actually connected to a platform called Chargeify in the very first year we did this. And we were able to enter in cards through a web interface we had built. You couldn't pay from your phone yet, but we could enter in your credit card from there, and we could process your payment at checkout electronically. Okay. And then obviously the ultimate goal, it was to automate all of that, which we did when we moved off of Chargeify and onto Stripe. And then we built all of the automated payment elements directly into our interfaces, our web interface, and into our native apps.
Okay. So from 2012, tell us the rest of the story from 2012 to now. How's the company doing?
Good. So from 2012 to about late 2014, Handbid was, I would say, kind of more of a regional small product. We didn't really market it. We didn't have any investors involved in growing the business. That changed in the summer of 2014. We took on some investment. We rebuilt the platform and started to launch it from there. So from 2015 to today, we've seen just absolutely, I would say, exponential growth in a lot of areas, in the areas of obviously the number of auctions we run, the bids we process. We've had over 1 million downloads of our app. We have run, tens of thousands of charity events in that time frame as well. And we've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for charities since that kind of 2015 time frame.
Okay. And how do you go to market? How do you find these new opportunities?
That's a good question. So I would say the primary driver of business for Handbid is word of mouth. People who have used the product, they tell 6 of their charity colleagues about it. And so we get a lot of people saying, I either used this at an event and loved it, or a friend of mine runs a charity and used you guys and had a great experience. Outside of that, we try to establish the proper online web presence. So people who are looking for charity auctions, mobile bidding, peer-to-peer fundraising, text to give, online donation campaigns can find us.
Okay. What would you say you guys do that makes you different than some of your competitors out there?
I think the one thing that we've focused on from the beginning is the end-to-end guest experience. And when you think about using software for your nonprofit, there's kind of 2 sides to that coin. One of them is, can I find something that's going to make my life easier in terms of how I'm going to manage this fundraiser? We certainly want to make anybody who uses our software, we want to make their lives easier, right? We want to automate, I would say, complicated, mundane, difficult processes, right? We want to eliminate human error. We want to make it really, really easy to not just set up and run a fundraiser, but have real-time information about how it's doing, because then I can make smarter decisions throughout the event. The flip side of that, though, is we want to create a great guest experience. That's the thing that drove us to build Handbid in the first place. We didn't want to just automate an auction. I wanted guests to get engaged. I wanted them to stay connected to my event. I wanted them to, what I would say, interact and have more of a fun game-like experience with the auction versus just having to stand up and walk over and enter things into a bid sheet, or some of the tools that were out there at the time. I mean, some of these interfaces from our competitors back in the day were just so cumbersome and difficult to use that, sure, maybe they were cheaper, or maybe they automated the setup or bundling of items, but at the same time, you're frustrating your guests. And if you're frustrating your guests, guess what they're not going to do? They're not going to bid on things. And if they're not going to bid on things, you're not going to make any money. And so that's why we built an app in 2011. I mean, for us, nothing allows me to stay more connected and engaged with any sort of application, or any sort of system than an app does, right? And you've seen a lot of the different technology companies out there throughout the years. They've done an about face on that, right? I mean, Facebook was big on their mobile web platform back in 2011, 2012 timeframe. So was LinkedIn. All of those guys eventually realized we can't create the user experience that we want and our users demand through a web interface. And so they've completely gone the other direction, and so now it's primarily app-based for them. And it's the same for us. I mean, if I'm trying to keep somebody connected and engaged, I can do that much better through an app. And none of our other competitors for the longest time ever built one. And then the ones that have more recently done it, I mean, the problem with theirs is we've got over 15 years experience building apps. Our app has been in the App Store for 10 years. We have over 1 million downloads. We got like 18 or 19,000 reviews on our app. It gets a 4.8 rating. So we've definitely been able to refine that user experience and do a lot more with it. And that's important, right? Because again, what we tell our competitor, or not competitors, but we tell our customers out there who are looking at our competitors, you got to see both sides of this coin. And for us, the guest experience is something that's just been largely ignored.
So how do you charge your customers?
The software license fee for Handbid is a fixed price. That's something that's pretty common in the nonprofit side of auctions, not so much on the commercial side, but you buy a fixed annual contract package from us depending on what kind of elements you need and how many auctions you want to run or how big those auctions are. And then we have a potpourri, an entire suite of services that you can buy on top of that, whether it be consulting, staffing at an event. We have video programming, live streaming, all those types of things that we've done on behalf of clients, especially during the COVID years where people have moved more of that stuff into a virtual setting. We handle all that for them as well. On the payment side, we offer a flat fee percentage plus a transaction fee to cover not just our costs, but also to kind of give them that kind of one-stop shop payment solution.
Okay. Yeah. And that leads sort of into the next question. I mean, obviously you offer payments as part of your solution. So why would they choose to use your payment solution as opposed to maybe their own?
I'd say number one reason is guest experience. And we're not that much more than what they would end up paying anyway to use us. And we offer the convenience of a guest. The auction closes, the event closes. All those items are automatically put onto an invoice, which is auto-generated, and the client or the end user can pay directly from their phone with just a click of a button. And it really has changed the entire payment process and the checkout. So typically what would end up happening right back in the day when you weren't doing it this way is the auction ends or the event ends and these guests have to line up to pay. Well, if I didn't win anything, but I wanted to make a $250 donation, I still got to stand in line to pay if you're not going to let me pay from my phone. And that starts to annoy people to the point where they don't pay or they don't donate. They just go home. So for us, that's, I would say, the biggest argument. The other one is we've built a very secure system. We understand credit card security. A lot of charities don't. So when they're dealing with something offline, they can start to really kind of cross those, I would say, security boundaries pretty quickly. I mean, you can imagine the donation cards that sit around the tables that people write their credit card information on and they toss to the side and some charity comes and picks them up and they're supposed to manually enter in all that data and you're already starting to get scared on I could tell, right?
Oh, yeah.
So And then they just toss them in the trash, right? All of that goes away in a system like this. But I mean, we've had clients that have pushed back. I mean, that have said, well, I can save myself a half a percentage point if I don't use you and do it myself. And some of them held out for a year or two, and their guests are mad. They're standing in line at checkout. And why are payments disabled through the app? Why can't I pay through there? Why do I have to stand in this line? You know? It's just not worth it.
Yeah. So it's a user experience reason that. Yeah.
User experience first and foremost. Security is number two.
Okay. So obviously you have some experience on the payment side. You know how important it is. You've integrated into your solution. So can you talk a little bit about that? So obviously you didn't originally, and over time you did. So you've probably learned a lot about payment. So curious as to your journey through payments and integrating it. Can you kind of tell us that story a little bit?
Yeah. Well, the very first thing we ran through here, we just weren't at a point where we were ready to try to do anything inside the app. And so that second year, when we said we really want to start integrating payments, we needed something that was going to work natively inside of an iPhone app or an iPad app or an Android app. And you may or may not be surprised to hear this, but back in 2012, 13, 14 timeframe, payments industry just didn't have a lot of those tools available. And so we would get people that would call us up and say, we can process for you. We can give you a smoking deal. This is going to be amazing. And we say, great. So send us over your iOS SDKs and your Java SDKs for Android. We'll take a look at them and see if we can build a secure solution with your software. Oh, we don't have those. No, we only have a web interface. So you're going to have to take the guest in the app and they're going to hit a pay button. And that's going to open up a temporary web page. And they're going to go to this payment page to process their payment. And I said, okay, well, yeah, we don't want that, right? I want an integrated experience. I want an end user to think that the payments are securely done inside of the app. I'm not interested in some sort of third-party payment that requires that a website get opened up from the app. And so for the longest time, we just didn't really talk to anybody save Stripe. I mean, Stripe was the one we started with, and it's still the one we primarily use. And that was in the very beginning, that was the major reason why. A couple different payment processors have come along since then and have provided us those types of SDKs now. And so then we started to open up those discussions again. And that brings us kind of to the other thing that we think is critically important. And that's just working with a provider who really understands our payment flow, can tolerate that, and can deal with the unusual, I would say, volume that comes through a charity event. And so to break that apart, the way things work in a platform like Handbid is card information or credit cards are typically swiped at the door at an event. So you're tokenizing a card up front, and then you store that token, but it may not be for 4, 5, 6 hours, maybe even a day before you actually capture that transaction. Because I come in the door, I swipe my card, it's now on file. I go to the event, I donate money, I win stuff in the auction, 10 o'clock, which is maybe 4 or 5 hours later, that's when I hit the pay button. And we worked with certain credit card providers out there that had a real hard time with that. You know, it's kind of a card not present transaction. And so they want to ding you on that. But then we're not capturing CVC or anything. We're not asking a user to enter that at the payment. And, we already have the card token. And so that became a struggle for some of them. And then the other side of this is that payment volume in terms of how it looks across the board is really odd. And so some of the providers we integrated with didn't understand that either. So when you fill out a merchant account and you go in there and you say, what's your average monthly volume? All right, well, we probably do maybe 5,000 or 10,000 a month in donations. Well, then you go run a charity event. You don't tell the credit card company that, and all of a sudden, $70,000, $80,000 is processed that night. Some of these companies were shutting our accounts out. And that's real hard to recover from the night of the event, right?
Right.
They're calling us up and they're mad. And I was like, well, it's such and such shut you down or froze your account. We're going to have to get on the phone with them in the morning and figure it out. And that kind of also ran into higher decline rates with some of these that didn't really know how to handle some of these. I mean, one thing that will get a charity to call you on a Saturday night at 11 o'clock more than anything is when they've got a row of people sitting in front of them whose cards are all getting declined. And these people are certainly wealthy enough to pay their bill. It's probably more of a fraud check issue or something else, and you're trying to work through it. I was at an event once, this is a couple years ago, but this guy came up, he had a $210,000 bill, and he hands me his American Express card. Is he expecting it to get declined? Because I could tell you he wasn't. And guess what? I mean, we ran it through Stripe and it went through. I mean, that's what people expect. And so those are the big challenges for us in this space. It's different than when you think about a technology company who's just giving you donation technology, right? Maybe you're putting up a donation form on your website and you're processing through that. Those are much easier to do in the sense that I fill out the form, I put my credit card in, I put in my 3-digit code. All of that is processed right there on the fly. I'm not tokenizing and storing a card. I'm not charging it later. So I think that just adds a little wrinkle of complexity for us that we've had to work through. But we've definitely found some technology partners who have figured it out for us.
Okay. And those, are they typical? Is it a combination of companies that you've had to use, or have you been able to find one partner that can solve all of it?
Well, I mean, I would say the one partner who's done the best in solving all of this for us is Stripe, for sure. They're not the cheapest, but they have some really, really powerful tools. It makes it real easy for us to kind of dig in. Their developer tools are top of the line. But we've worked with some other providers, and they've also provided us, I would say, the developer tools that we need. It's just that usually we run into high decline rates with them, or we run into other types of instability issues, which they just lower our confidence. So when we talk to certain customers, we say, hey, here's the mix, right? Here are your options on how you can process through Handbid. This is our recommendation, is that you use this one. We're not going to change the rates, right? Our rates wouldn't change between the technology providers. So typically, if we're going to recommend you use another technology company over Stripe, it's usually because that charity already has a relationship with that payment provider.
Okay. And overall, how important or integral to your business is payments?
It's extremely important, right? I mean, for us, we are the commerce engine of the event, the night of that event, 100%. We're processing drink tickets. We're processing tickets to get into the event. We're doing all of the donations. We're doing all of the auctions. When payments go down, we hear about it. They don't, but if they did, we would definitely.
Right. It's part of the user experience that you can't do without.
No, I mean, we had an event that went in Hawaii a few weeks ago. They're on a third party. They weren't using Stripe, but they were on a third party solution, and they were having high decline rates. I mean, and we were trying to work with them and the payment gateway to get those resolved. And they're not mad at Handbid, but they're just annoyed because their guests are annoyed. Because as you can imagine, when your card gets declined, it's embarrassing, even if it's for a legitimate reason.
Right. Especially at an event like, a charity event.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else related to payments that you wanted to cover or talk about?
I think for us, we're curious to see where the payments industry goes. We've gotten a lot of questions from people about support for blockchain or cryptocurrency, and we haven't really gone there yet, but I think the payments industry is definitely going to evolve here, and we're going to try to stay on top of it. And I don't know if that's something that you've explored on your podcast or not, but that's something we're definitely interested in seeing how that plays out.
Yeah, more so on my other podcast, which is called Leaders in Payments, where I talk to typically CEOs. I would say in the last 5 to 10 podcasts that I've done, it has come up almost every time. And, when you have things that are happening like in the news with Elon Musk and everything he's done around crypto and the fact that we've seen it go sky high and then fall off the cliff, and banks coming out saying they're supporting it and then saying they're not supporting it. And definitely crypto is a challenge and a hot topic right now. So I'm not surprised that, that you're thinking about it and that the industry as a whole, I think, is it a stored value kind of thing, or is it a payment mechanism? And I think a lot of that is still yet to be determined, and we'll kind of see over time how that goes, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I would tell you that that's one thing that we've got probably a longer term radar look at. I would say on the shorter term side, we're looking at more of the peer-to-peer payment methods, the Venmos and Apple. I don't know what they call it, but it's not Apple Pay, but Apple Cash or something like that. Those types of things we're looking at as well to see how those might be able to be integrated into our technology.
Okay. And circling back to the business, I had a question. So you said you raised money. Is that something you're actively doing or you did in the past or what's the situation with the money?
It's a good question. We raised money in the past. We're not opposed to, I would say, additional funding at all to accelerate growth. I mean, I think the one thing that probably holds Handbid back in terms of growth rate more than anything else would just be available cash. I mean, we're a small company, right? And when you compare us against our competitors, we compete very well. I mean, most of our competitors have had tens of millions of dollars in institutional funding. We haven't had anywhere near that. And I think with the right investors, we'd be even a bigger player and threat to some of the folks out there. And payments is probably the biggest magnet in our space for investors who want to roll in. They want to roll up a number of companies like Handbid in the space so they can generate a lot of payment volume and then integrate, with their own payment platform or something that's internally built to drive revenue on the payment side. And there's a lot of volatility in that. When you think of, your comments about cryptocurrency, the problem with payment volume as your primary business model in our space is if you don't stabilize your customer base in terms of churn and renewal rates, you can see major fluctuations in your payment volume, right? Because if customer A doesn't renew with me and he normally processes 200,000 as an event every year, that's 200,000 I'm down, right? And that's why for us, it's super important that we drive a more stable user base. We don't give away free software. We're not after the payment volume. We're after a happy customer. And we think the rest of it takes care of itself.
Right. What kind of, if you're willing to say, what kind of payment volume do you do?
Yeah, we're in that tens of millions, right? We're not in the hundreds of millions range yet. We're in the tens of millions range. We were on a fairly sharp 30% growth rate track there until COVID. The event space has not even come close to have recovered from COVID yet. People are really holding off on charity events until I think more of the country opens up. So I think we'll be able to get back to where we were before, but it's 1,000 times better than it was a year ago, but it's still not there yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, any other final thoughts, either regarding your business or payments in general you wanted to talk about?
No, I appreciate you spending the time. If you have anybody who's listening who's connected with a charity looking for, I would say, the best guest experience you'll find, somebody who can definitely reduce the headaches and the stress and the fear that comes with running an event, especially if you're thinking about doing it online or even what we would call hybrid, like a mix of online and in person, have them give us a call.
Okay. And what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of us is to go to www.handbid.com. There's a contact us form there. There's a schedule a demo form, and we'll reach right back out to you.
Okay. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your time and everything you've shared today.
Greg, thank you for having us. We were thrilled to be on it.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Monetize Your Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at monetizeyourpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you will find our show notes. If you would like to be on the show or have a suggestion for a guest, please email greg@monetizeyourpayments.com.